October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and at Capitol Ford in Santa Fe, we're proud to stand with the survivors, the fighters, and the families who inspire us every single day. And while we honor their strength, we're also helping you with the strength to save with special dealer offers. Like a new Ford F-150 XLT, save with 3.9% APR financing for 72 months. Or a new Ford Bronco Sport, lease for just $399 a month at Capitol Ford.
Hey, welcome in to another live episode of the Pit Pass Live. I'm your host, Eric Moulton. Got a special episode lined up for you guys tonight. We will be joined in about a minute or two by Rocco Miller, college basketball analyst, and he kind of spreads his wings far and wide, covers college basketball from a national perspective, and he'll be actually at or in Las Vegas covering the Mountain West Media Days. I think he's bounced around to a few other media days, but he covers the game real closely and particularly mid-major basketball. But before we jump into Rocco Miller, I want to introduce my co-host for tonight, at least kicking off the show, Mr. Ed Nunez, the finer half of the Nunez duo. Nick, how you doing tonight, man?
Doing good, Eric. Excited to have Rocco Miller on tonight. It's an exciting time for Lobo fans. There's a lot going on with Lobo athletics. You got a big football game on Saturday. Lobo women's basketball has an exhibition tomorrow in the Pit, and then Mountain West Media Days on Thursday. So excited to get more into it, Eric.
Yep, I'm excited for that too. I'm actually going to try to make that women's exhibition tomorrow, trying to convince my wife to go. We might take our two little ones to go check it out, show them some love, and actually get a firsthand look of what their roster looks like. I know we haven't done too much work with women's basketball, but we'll look to do that more this year. But second half of tonight's show, we'll bring on Ed and Greg Archuleta, cover some UNM Lobo football. I know that Coach Eck and Robert Portnoy were just wrapping up Lobo talk at Sandia Casino. But without further ado, let's get to tonight's episode. Joining us tonight from California, I think I have that right? Mr. Rocco Miller. Rocco, thanks for joining us, man.
My pleasure. Yes, you have that right. For one more day before we get out to lovely Las Vegas for Mountain West and WCC Media Days combined. Should be quite the car wash over there, but looking forward to the season starting. How are you guys doing?
Doing awesome. Really pleasure to have you on our show. I know you've been on before. I was just telling Nick backstage when we were kind of getting things put together that I had a chance to meet you for the first time. It was your very first Pit experience with last year, maybe the year before, but a lot has changed in Lobo land. And you mentioned on backstage again that you're actually really good friends with Coach Eric Olen. So we'll kind of dive into a little bit of that. But I do want to give you a chance to kind of plug your website, the Bracketeer. I know you're doing a lot of real good work and now associated with the Field of 68. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about the Bracketeer, what you've been doing recently, and you guys' big project with the Field of 68.
Yeah, appreciate it. So Bracketeer.org has been the foundation for me, bracketology wise, and in terms of all college basketball thoughts, coverage, etc. For the last decade, I would say. So that will only continue, and also looking to bring on a couple close friends, up and coming writers this year that will cover both the East Coast and the West Coast. So we'll try to cover between the three of us all things both mid-major and bracketology. And then I'm also working now with Basket Under Review. It's a new platform with several outstanding, talented writers. Emin Brennan, who used to work at ESPN, it has a podcast on there on Mondays. The Three Man Weave and other guys are all part of it. We're super excited. So I'll have some special pieces on there from time to time. Actually, one coming soon on the Mountain West. So I definitely wanted to highlight that as well. And then over at Field of 68, our mid-major show, really excited about it. It's actually the 4th season, but for the first time, it's a live production. So much like the show we're on right now, we basically are working with the same production team that does Field of 68's very popular After Dark show each night when the games are ending, and getting all that instant reaction. So once the season starts, that will actually cover the 22 leagues that are traditionally one bid leagues. So not necessarily the Mountain West, unfortunately, but we will have Conference USA, which is New Mexico State, and of course UTEP, who are near Albuquerque geographically, and then all the other 21 leagues that are traditional one bid leagues. So that's a live show Thursdays at 5 Eastern, 3 Mountain time. And also once January rolls around, the Bracketology show that I think everybody's come to know and love on Field of 68. I'm a big part of that as well. That will come out like mid-January, twice a week, Mondays and Fridays. So big season ahead, lots to cover, lots to talk about.
Yeah, and they're keeping you busy. And then I actually just subscribed to the Basket Under Review, which is kind of a cool feature. Covering it from all angles. The website's actually put together real nice. But for anyone listening, if you are listening or watching on YouTube, I did attach the link to the bracketeer.org in the description. So go ahead and check out Rocco's work. But let's just get into it. Rocco, I want to kind of kick it off more with the UNM discussion, and then we'll dive into the Mountain West conversation. But like I mentioned before, it's a new look and feel for Lobo fans at UNM. UNM's new identity with as much roster turnover, right? They have a brand new roster, new coaching staff under Eric Olen. What is your early assessment of the new look Lobos? And then what is your biggest question mark surrounding their style, new system of play?
Yeah, it's a loaded question. So I guess, first of all, I was fortunate to spend a good chunk of time with UC San Diego. I just happened to be down in Daytona Beach, Florida, where they played their 3-game multi-team event last year called the Boardwalk Battle. And that's really, I think, when the everything started to spark for the team. They won that tournament in 3 games. They played, at the time, what we thought was a good Toledo team, and they blew them out. We kind of know what the rest looked like. They end up winning the Big West. It was their first year of transition. I think they're the first school to ever be first-year transition and win both the regular season and tournament titles. They also were arguably good enough to be selected if they didn't win the tournament title. It was just an unbelievable season. So I went down to Irvine as well. I saw them play, I think, 5 games last year in person. And that's where, I built a relationship with the staff, Eric included. And I just think, first of all, with the staff that he's brought in, he brought over Mikey Howell and Sam Stapleton. Mikey was a longtime player at UC San Diego for Eric, and now he's like 4 years removed from playing. He knows the system inside and out as a player, and now coaching it and having success, of course, at UC San Diego. And Sam Stapleton is just an unbelievably hardworking guy. He's actually the person on the staff I've known the longest because he was doing the scheduling for the Tritons for the last 4 years. And now he doesn't have to do that anymore because Mike Roberts is on staff. And Mike's a longtime schedule guy from Cincinnati. And Mike Roberts, he'll bring in a big-time defensive pedigree. If you remember Wes Miller before he got the Cincinnati job. Great defenses in the Southern Conference, getting UNC Greensboro in position to win that league multiple times. Also 1 year, I think, being in the at-large hunt themselves. And combined with Michael Wilder, who's also on staff from the great UC Irvine program that is just at the top of the Big West year in and year out. Those two guys will run the Lobos defense this year. I think that's really exciting because you're getting kind of the best of both worlds, like a Wes Miller's influence coach and Mike Roberts basically spent most of the last decade under him, besides 1 year at UTEP last year. And then Wilder, he's been at UC Irvine for 15 years as a player and a coach for 10. I'm super excited. And then you add Tom Tankelwitz, and I think Tankelwitz is probably the most interesting assistant just based on the fact that he's an offensive guru. They run unbelievable system stuff. He's a rising star conceptually. He's got an amazing brain. He's got a master's degree. And so Tankelwitz running the O with all the other, bright spots on the staff under Eric. It's an awesome staff. So I really do think no matter how much talent they realize this year, they're going to maximize it. And I think the strengths will continue. I don't think you can expect this team to do what UC San Diego did last year. Like their big thing was turnover on both sides, like turnover prevention, top 5 in the country. Just never make mistakes, always clean with the ball, take great shots. And then on the defensive side of the ball, they were top 15, actually maybe even top 5 as well. Yeah, they were 3rd in the nation actually in creating turnovers. So their margin of on the turnover side is unbelievable. Now, I don't know if they can duplicate that, like I said, but they should be one of the better turnover margin teams in the Mountain West and ideally the country. And that's all based on the system. And then you look at the roster, we'll jump into the roster. I think my biggest concern, just so we can get to the next question, is, so many of these guys they brought in have to take a jump forward. Like Kevin Patton Jr. is an unbelievable athlete. He probably is an NBA level athlete, which is super exciting, but he just needs a full season. He got to USC last year, couldn't find his way into consistent minutes. He had a good year at University of San Diego, but that team struggled to win many games in the WCC. So you want to see that combination of winning and putting all of his game together and being able to stay on the court. I think Dayton Albury is probably the most proven guy. I think Jeff Grammer's voted him on his old Mountain West ballot. I saw Jeff's notes a little earlier this morning. But I think, guys like JT Rock, 7'1", big time potential, couldn't really cut it in the Big 12. Maybe the Mountain West is the right level for a guy like that. You've got a few foreign guys coming over. Antonio Chol was a JUCO All-American, but again, got to do it at this level. And Luke Haupt, I think there's a lot of excitement about Luke Haupt and his high IQ, basically an extended coach on the court, comes from Point Loma, a very successful Division II program that's been to the Final Four. But now he's got to do it in the Mountain West. So is he athletic enough? Those types of things. So it's really just like a lot of these players need to take another step forward. I think the most proven guy on the roster is Chris Howell, probably UC San Diego's best defender, 76 steals last year. He's 6'6". He's intelligent. He's long. He's always prepared. And, of course, his brother's one of the assistant coaches. So he's going to be a leader on and off the court for this team. And that gives the program a lot of stability, I think.
Yeah, long-winded answer. I love it. It's interesting enough. Nick actually wrote an article that touched on the defensive approach that Olen has, and he mentioned all those stats that you just did, and we were talking about, like, what is our defensive identity going to look like? How's the chemistry going to fit together? All interesting stuff, and I think everyone's just ready to see them roll the ball out there and see how they get up and down. But, yeah, going back to the UCSD defensive stats and just the prowess and how they move on the court together, they were doing that with guys that were 6'4" to 6'6", 6'7". Right. Now with UNM, you guys got guys at 6'6" all the way to 6'9", 7 foot who can move. So it kind of just throws that element in there, the long athletic bodies that can move. It's a little bit more intimidating. But moving on to the next question, more focusing on what the Lobos lost last year, right? Like their whole roster left. Patino is now at Xavier, but replacing some of that star power. UNM primarily got most of their scoring. I want to say about 60% of their points came from the Donovan Dent, Nelly Jr. Joseph duo. Is there one player on the current roster that you project to maybe have a true breakout go-to guy type season?
I think it's tough to project. I would agree that it's Albury, potentially just because he's a little bit special with the quickness and maybe he can show some semblance of. I mean, nobody's going to be as good as Donovan Dent. He was absolutely electric. The game I saw you guys at the pit, that was the 40-point game against VCU, and so I feel like I was spoiled just being there for that one. But Albury, he'll do it at a little bit of a smaller scale scoring wise, but I think he'll do a great job with his quickness. And I think the Lobo faithful will really appreciate the spacing that the offense plays with. Really, it's like getting a new Christmas present, right? They're all going to be wearing Lobos jerseys. I think they're going to maximize, like I said, the capability of this roster. And last year's team produced amazing memories as well, winning a game in the NCAA tournament. That's really, really hard to do at the Mountain West level. And those memories should be preserved for forever at this point. But I do think this is just a whole different team, whole different coaches. But you're still, I think, in the end, going to like the way they play because, like I said in the beginning, they're not going to make mistakes. Players are constantly moving without the ball. There's a lot of actions being run at all times, even if they use the entire shot clock. And they also kind of play it out that way defensively with elite transition denial defense. I think we'll talk about that more. But then also once the opponents get set up in their half-court stuff, there's a lot of communication. There's a lot of switching. There's just a lot of coordination defensively, and they're extremely skilled at getting one-and-done stops, which you and I both know, or both you and I know, like that's the key in college basketball. How many stops can you string together? Even if you go cold for a while, that will keep you in a ball game or allow, if you are shooting well, that's when you go on your 10-0, your 12-0, your 14-0 runs and bury the opponent. So I'm just really excited that you guys get to see this in action because, they've been able to build this system. And again, the kids they had last year, they were together for 4 years. This is 8 transfers and 5 freshmen. And then Antonio Chol, I guess it counts as a 9th transfer. So yeah, it might not all click on night number 1 or even night number 9, but by night number 29, this could be a very, very good team, or maybe even 19.
Yeah. Nick.
Yeah. Hey, Rocco, wanted to shift gears and ask you about UNM's non-conference schedule. 12-game schedule. They got a couple quad 1, quad 2 opportunities at the MTE, the Hall of Fame Classic in Kansas City, November 20th and 21st, and then they'll go to VCU in early December. But what do you think about UNM's non-conference schedule?
Yeah, I think in general, it will get harder in the future. This isn't the hardest schedule by any means in the Mountain West or as hard as what the last staff did. But I think some of that's by design because you have, like I just said, 14 new players. Eventually that's going to whittle down to 8 or 9 guys on an everyday basis. And I think for the Lobos to be able to build a resume, they're going to need to win at least out of these 12 games. They're going to need to win at least 10 of them probably in all reality, maybe 9. And I think that the Hall of Fame tip-off's really their only chance to play a Power 5 team, and they get a chance to play 2 of them no matter what. So Nebraska, for me, they project right there as a bubble team. And if New Mexico can go out and beat Nebraska, that'd be really impressive, especially early November 20th. And then they got to turn around the next night and play another Power 5. I think ideally you want to play Mississippi State. They project probably a tad better than Kansas State. We'll have to see. Kansas State, of course, has PJ Haggerty and spent a lot of money, but I'm just not sold they spent it all in the right way. But again, that's exciting for the Lobos to get those shots, go there and at least get one of those wins. And then, like you said, at VCU, they'll play at New Mexico State. That's probably, VCU should be a quad 1 on the road. New Mexico State hopefully can get up to quad 2. And you never know what happens in that New Mexico State game. You guys know that. But I think in general, they just want to be in position to have like 8, 9, 10 wins entering league play. That's how the schedule was designed. Santa Clara will be a really good home game. Santa Clara's got a lot of talent. And after that, it's just going to be how you navigate the league standings, protect your home court. You don't want to lose ever at the pit. And then you got to pick some big ones off on the road in the league to actually have a chance to get in at large. So winning at Boise State, maybe winning at San Diego State or Utah State, winning at Grand Canyon is obviously extremely difficult. So, yeah, a lot of chances within the league as well.
Rocco, you've talked a lot about some of the guys that UNM has brought on this year. Can you tell us how you think this roster matches up with some other teams in the Mountain West? You know, you got some teams like San Diego State that's going to have some size inside traditional post size with Magoon Guath. Utah State has gotten bigger this year. Just how do you think UNM will match up with other teams in the Mountain West?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think this New Mexico roster, as you guys alluded to, has got great positional size. So I think when, outside of Albury, who's 6'2", basically totally fine at the one spot, everybody at each position, especially when JT Rock is on the floor, has a chance to have a size advantage. Kevin Patton Jr. can play the 3 at 6'8". Now, again, we're still wondering if he could put a full season together. I'm also really, really intrigued by Tomislav Buljan, played in the top Croatian league last year, coming in as a 6'9" freshman. Historically, European players need a year or two to adjust to college basketball, but we're now in this era where paying for players from pro leagues, they're kind of ready for Mountain West basketball, you would have to imagine. So between him and Timio Pons, who's also 6'8", played in for the France team at FIBA U19. And so there's just a lot of like tall pieces at the 2, 3, 4 spots, including Milos Vincentić, who's a 6'7" player that got started for UC San Diego, went down in the second game, unfortunately. So hopefully he's healthy. But yeah, I think they'll match up really well on the wings and at the shooting guard spot and at the power forward spot. Now it just depends. Like there's going to be some big men. Like whenever Magoon Guath gets healthy, I imagine he'll be healthy by Mountain West play. That could be a size disadvantage. Utah State's got some bigs. Boise State's got some bigs. So you're gonna have your challenges once you get into Mountain West play. And also that Nebraska game, right? Like Rick Moss, he just had 29 points, 8 rebounds. He's a gigantic center for Nebraska. I just think with the variation of different zone defenses and different ways that UC San Diego played last year, this staff will figure that part out. And I think, one of the hardest things to be really good at as a college basketball staff is make proper adjustments. And that's one thing this staff, at least the majority of it that came from UC San Diego, was just masterclass at last year. No one wanted to call timeout, go into new defenses, try to change the momentum of the game. And that's half the battle right there.
Rocco, one more question from me, and then I'll turn it back to Eric. But is it fair to kind of compare UNM to Utah State from last year, at least having some similarities to Utah State, a team that played some matchup zone, 2-3 zone last year, wasn't the biggest in the front court? I mean, is it a fair comparison, or will they be a lot different?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting comparison. I haven't thought about that. Obviously, Albury is very similar because he's on both teams, right? But I think, I mean, Utah State played about an average tempo. I think New Mexico will probably play on the slower side, but I could be wrong. I didn't get to see them practice. So I think that one thing Utah State did a very good job at as well, which is similar to how New Mexico will likely play, is make teams, make it hard for teams to get a shot off in their shot clock. Utah State was number 2 in the nation last year at doing that. And I think UC San Diego was certainly the best in the Big West at doing that. So certainly some of the stylistic components, obviously, at Utah State, they have Mason Falslev, who's just possibly the player of the year in the Mountain West and coming into this year at least. And Ian Martinez was a totally 6th-year proven spark plug guy that can go get you a basket. So they're not really similar in that way because New Mexico still got to figure out those roles. But, yeah, maybe by the end of the year we should revisit that and see where it's at.
For sure. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, Rocco, you just mentioned about the new leadership at UNM, and a lot of people want to know, is what he built at UC San Diego, is that going to translate to what at UNM, right? At UNM, I think he obviously has more resources, more fan support, but he's also got a bigger spotlight. To you, what do you think Olen's ceiling is at UNM, just based off of his overall history, consistently making the NCAA tournament and actually making a lot of noise last year?
Well, the ceiling is certainly high. I mean, being able to, because I've had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with these guys, especially Eric and Sam specifically, and my understanding is it's the day-to-day process and the way that they run both offense and defense and what they focus on, and the types of kids they bring in. That's the part that really matters. Doing it on a bigger stage in front of a bigger audience should make it even more exciting, right? Like getting those fans rowdy and making that place impossible to win at should only help. But I think for these guys, the way they think, it's a total process oriented system from top to bottom, whether that's recruiting or X's and O's, in-game adjustments, pregame scouting, the whole 9 yards, putting the right rotations together, making sure they have high IQ basketball players. And again, it's, with the timing of him getting the job and the timing of the transfer portal, maybe they didn't get their first choice at some of these positions for this year. And that's the part where there's some variability for this immediate season is, maybe a couple of these guys don't pan out the way they expected. And then they have to pivot and make some adjustments and let some younger guys play. If that happens, that could certainly put a different ceiling on the season and take the NCAA tournament out of the equation. But for right now, based on what I see as a potential rotation, or even if a couple guys get hurt here or there or get removed from the rotation, I think they can make this roster work. Like I said, with the defense of Howell, the excitement coming in of, a guy like Luke Haupt, who, again, won a ton of games at Point Loma, JT Rock, if he can pan out, and we've talked about Kevin Patton a lot already. But those are just some examples, plus the foreign guys. And Antonio Chol has limitless potential starting his career at Rutgers and being a JUCO first-team All-American last year. So there's a lot of pieces. It's just these guys got to like each other, and then they got to buy into the system. And I really believe that these guys, especially with the track record, the really, really, really recent track record, can get there with this group. But it'll be fascinating to watch it play out.
Yeah, I'm going to bounce around. I know I sent you that agenda, but focusing more on like Mountain West and the conference. Conference top of the conference. I think this year it's pretty unanimous that San Diego State's going to get a lot of first place votes, and rightfully so, just with the amount of talent that they have coming back, and then also some transfers coming in. But San Diego State's sustainability and what Brian Dutcher has been able to build upon, and just making them really competitive year in and year out. Would you look at this year as a potential rebuilding year for San Diego State? Is it more reloading? I mean, how do you feel about San Diego State?
Yeah, definitely not reloading this year. I mean, this is probably, you could argue, the best backcourt that, on paper at least, that they've ever been able to retain or put together, right? So they added 2 big pieces to it, but they also already had 3 big pieces. So we'll start with Miles Bird, who's an NBA level player. If things go right for Mr. Bird this year, he'll hear his name called at the NBA draft. So that's a big piece, especially at the Mountain West level. Then BJ Davis, who we saw in spurts last year, really come on as a scorer. I think he had that exhibition game last year against UCLA with 28 points. And with Reese Waters being injured last year, he took on a role that we didn't really know if he could cut it at San Diego State's level, but he certainly can. And now he's back along with Mr. Waters himself, who, of course, missed all last year. So that threesome right there is very, very formidable in the backcourt. Then it just has insurance, I think, because, Bird is out still with an abdominal strain. He missed that, this year's version versus UCLA, which just happened last week. Sean Newman Jr., one of the best playmakers, passers in Conference USA, top assist guys in the country, 7.9 assists at Louisiana Tech last year. And he's a redshirt 5th-year senior. So they got to figure out a role for Mr. Newman. He's got way too much experience to be sitting on the bench. And then Latrell Davis was probably my favorite San Jose State player. You guys probably remember Latrell. Averaged 11 points, 3 rebounds at San Jose State. So all those 5 guys I just listed are not only like bona fide good backcourt players, but they're all proven Division I, older. I mean, that's a ton of stability. And I think the big question mark at San Diego State, and again, the stability gives them a very high floor there, But the big question is Magoon Gwath and his knee. Obviously just got cleared, if you guys have been tracking that closely like I have, to do 5-on-0 drills. I think he's still several steps away from being cleared for the next step will be getting cleared for regular practice contact. Then he's going to have to start playing on it at full speed, and you know how that goes. I'm a guy who's had knee injuries, so I feel for the big man because he's a special talent and he really helps the Mountain West become a much better league if San Diego State's a bona fide top 25 team. But at this point, you know, I think it's fair to assume he's out until late November, maybe even later. And that could certainly impact San Diego State's chances at both an at-large bid and winning the league. Because after him, you have Miles Heide, who played more of a reserve role. He'll be serviceable in the middle. And Farrell Compton, who I think is a very solid four-man, but doesn't move the needle like Gwath does with his 2.6 blocks per game and a solid rebounder, but not a special rebounder. And I think that's also the other concern I have about the Aztecs is that last year, you know, it's a program built on defense, block shots, and rebounding. They had still a pretty good defense, definitely elite shot blocking, but rebounding was the worst it's ever been under Brian Dutcher last year. And they didn't really do much to change the front court. They're basically relying on Gwath to make a full recovery. And then, of course, the other pieces I mentioned. And so my large concern there is that they didn't do enough to address the rebounding issue. And if San Diego State has off nights, you know, not getting second opportunities or not keeping teams off their own offensive glass could really, really be an Achilles heel for this team.
Yeah, I got one more and then I'll hand it back to Nick. But we just talked about San Diego State and what they've been able to sustain in the Mountain West for a really long time. But on the flip side of that, you got a newcomer in the Mountain West in GCU, and we'll do a much deeper dive on GCU with Brennan Williams, who covers them exclusively at Go Lopes Radio. But what can you say about GCU, right? 10 newcomers to this team this year. I think 3 conference titles, 4 NCAA tournament appearances under Bryce Drew. But he's built something pretty special there. And it's consistent, and I think it's kind of picking up traction from a national college basketball perspective. But what do you know about the Lopes, and what is your kind of expectation for them first year in the Mountain West?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to go there last year as well for the first time. That place it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. And now that they're in a bigger league, it's going to be impossible to get a ticket in that place. So it's a beautiful, of course, state-of-the-art arena, and very, very loud in there. So it fits kind of that Mountain West culture, like places like the Pit and Utah State, San Diego State. So it's another really, really tough place to play. I think they'll expect to go undefeated at home. If they don't expect that of themselves, there's a problem. And I really like what they did in the portal, actually. Like Brian Moore Jr., even though he's coming from a lower level at Norfolk State, unbelievable player. I think he was the MEAC Player of the Year. Puts up big numbers at that level. We'll see how much that translates up here in the Mountain West. Dusty Stromer, I think fans are familiar with him at Gonzaga. He can be completely lights out on certain nights from deep. Really probably needs to improve his defensive side of the ball, but he's going to have a real opportunity to succeed under Bryce Drew. Jaden Henley, of course, you guys know from UNLV, was a solid player there. He's a year older. And then I think the big X factor for the Lopes is Nana Owusu Anane. And he was actually one of our, in the one bid leagues, what we call the mid-major level, the mid-major show we have. He was our first team All-American last year for Brown University. And a couple weeks or maybe even a week before the season started, he goes down with a knee injury for the whole year. So he missed all of last year. But if he can return to his 23-24 form, that is a big-time needle mover and a guy that could be, good enough to be all Mountain West by the end of the year. Tough to put that on him coming off the injury. And they have a lot of other pieces, right? So they've leveled up to get ready for this Mountain West transition. And like I said, I don't expect them to lose much, if at all, at home. And if Grand Canyon can go pick off some big wins on the road, like they'll be in position to compete for the league title and certainly compete for an at-large bid.
Yeah, Nick.
Rocco, some of the preseason standings or predictions for the Mountain West will come out on Thursday at Mountain West Media Days. You've talked about San Diego State, Utah State, Boise State, probably being in that top tier. And then there's probably like 4 or 5 teams that maybe have legitimate chances to win a Mountain West title. I think New Mexico is one of them. But what can you tell us about some of the second-tier Mountain West teams like Colorado State, Nevada, UNLV? How do you think they'll be competitive in the Mountain West this year?
Yeah, I had a lot of excitement for UNLV throughout the summer. Good friend from over here in Santa Clara, Scott Garson. He's now over at UNLV running the offense. So I thought that was a really good hire by new head coach Josh Pastner. Bringing over a guy like Kamani Hamilton, who was a huge athletic playmaker for High Point, a team that played Purdue really tough last year in the NCAA tournament. I think that's a big-time add. Miles Che is a guy I love from UC Irvine. Bunch of these guys are banged up, and I know one of the big ones they were counting on was seven-footer Emmanuel Steffen, and it came out that he's going to be out for 8 to 12 weeks. Sometimes when I hear big numbers like that, I tend to think it could be longer. That kind of helped me, scale back on UNLV. They just played an exhibition game against Washington where, again, I don't take exhibition results too seriously, but I am looking for certain things like injuries, minute distribution, etc. And UNLV only had 7 scholarship players because they have so many injuries right now. If they can get healthy by league play, I think they can become a real factor. Draw Gibbs Lawhorn was their leading scorer in that exhibition game. He played at Illinois. So there is a significant amount of talent there. It's just, can they all get healthy and on the same page? That's a really tricky thing to navigate when it's your first year as well as a coach, because they're still getting to know you. And now their top priority is just getting healthy. So it's a lot to take in for those guys coming back from injury. At Colorado State, I really love the hire. We all know Ali Farouk Manesh, the hero for Northern Iowa during the great tournament against Kansas, took the gutsiest three-pointer of all time. Now he's worked his way up the coaching ranks. Nico Medved was an unbelievable coach, as you guys know, especially offensive, just runs incredible stuff. Nick Clifford, last year's Mountain West Player of the Year, thrived in that system, as did several before him, like Isaiah Stevens. I think that can continue, but I think this roster, because of the transition and all of that, it is certainly maybe more of a third tier. I put them below New Mexico and Grand Canyon. And Ali's got to prove himself as a head coach. A lot of new faces. One guy I've really liked a lot over the years is Josh Pasquarelli. In fact, he's only a junior. It seems like he's been there forever. But he comes over from Marist College in the Metro Atlantic, had great numbers, was definitely their best player, all league kind of guy. Curious what he can do in this level. But Colorado State doesn't have a ton of size unless guys like Kerry Booth and Nicola Japa play more than I expect them to play. So that could be a weakness for the Rams. And then I think Nevada is like coming off of a really disappointing year for their expectations. And, the momentum this summer didn't seem that strong to me. I still want to respect Steve Alford and everything he's accomplished in his career and what they even did just a couple of years ago. But I'm not really high on the Nevada roster. So I think those are the teams you'd probably consider in the next cut. So for me, it's pretty clearly New Mexico, Grand Canyon in the second tier, and then I would start the third tier with UNLV, CSU, then Nevada.
Speaking with college hoops analyst and bracketeer Rocco Miller. Rocco, I see a comment here from one of our loyal listeners, Kino Keeney. He has an opinion that the Mountain West gets 5 teams in the Mountain West or the conference, the NCAA tournament this year. I know it's hard to predict, man. It's so early. So many things can happen, so many variables, but looking at it from a bird's eye view right now, do you have a prediction on how many teams the Mountain West can get into the NCAA tournament this year?
I do think 4 is possible. And that's become the standard, which is crazy to say, right? Like, so last year was 4. The year before was the inside straight, as I call it, 6, with New Mexico taking the Mountain West tournament to get to 6. And then 4 the year before and 4 the year before. So they've actually set 4 as the standard. I think the concerns I have, well, I think there's pros and cons. So I'll start with the cons. So the concerns I have is the way the selection process played out last year. Probably for the first time in the last couple decades doing this stuff, forecasting the bracket, I was very concerned with the process because both Texas and North Carolina, I think, were 2 of the last teams in. And there really wasn't a lot of there certainly was no precedent for Texas to get in as the 14th SEC team, which is just crazy to say out loud. But also, the North Carolina thing was well documented, being 1-12 in quad 1. And that starts to really deflate my sails for even as big as schools as the Mountain West has, right? Like, but I do think one thing that the Mountain West has done on the pro side is I think it's amazing to get Grand Canyon in a year early, because that gives everybody an extra quad 1 road game at least. If Grand Canyon ends up being even better than that, could get a high quad 2, low quad 1 game at home. So you have to be excited about that as just a pure analyst, despite all the politics of the schools probably not liking them coming in. That helps everybody. So that's a huge plus to get that extra quality team in the league this year. And then I think the other part is each year, there's really only San Diego State or nobody predicted to be a top 40 team by like the Ken Palms of the world. And I think this year Ken Palms got nobody in the top 40. No, San Diego State's 30. So same story, right? Nobody getting top 25 votes, really. Same old story. But what ends up happening each year is teams will they'll emerge. Almost every year there'll be a team or two in this conference that hardly any people are picking, that just comes together and emerges, because the Mountain West is full of unbelievable coaching and cultures where these kids can thrive and play good enough games to build a resume. So, I do feel like they're going to find a way to get at least 3. When I went through my initial exercise, I only had San Diego State and Utah State making it. But I do want to find a way for like a Boise or New Mexico to squeeze in there on my projection. But it's just really hard, because if the Big Ten's getting 12 and the SEC's getting probably 12, and then they got the ACC, the Big 12's probably getting 8 or 9. We're running out of spots real quick with these power teams and all the money they're spending, and that's the part that I'm most concerned about.
Understood, Eric.
Yeah, on that topic, Rocco, I had a question keyed up with that on focusing on the high major programs around the country compared to the mid-major programs and the growing gap, right? The disparity. When you combine things like the transfer portal, rev sharing, NIL, the gap between the high majors and the mid majors is just continuing to grow. And it's really harder to make the case for the mid majors to make March Madness, right? But I think it was Evan Maya. He's the one that comes out with some of the new projected stats. It was almost all Power 4 programs were in the top 75 in Ken Palm. And so it's just so front loaded. And then you start talking about like March Madness and then potentially growing the field from 68 to 76. I wanted to get your comment on that, kind of the growing disparity and then the potential of the tournament gaining 8 more programs.
Yeah, I mean, the growing disparity was on full display last year when the bracket came out. We couldn't find a way to get a team like UC Irvine, who led the nation in road wins, even in the first 4 out. And that's really disheartening. We know Boise State did plenty to possibly earn a spot. They got left out from this league. And, you look at like the Atlantic 10, where George Mason and VCU duked it out all year. They were separated by 2 points in their last 2 games. George Mason wasn't really considered. San Francisco finally broke through over here in the West Coast Conference. They beat St. Mary's for the first time in forever, it felt like. Didn't really mean much at the end to the committee. And so, yeah, I mean, the growing disparity kind of showed its ugly colors when it comes to the end result that everybody can see, and that's in that fancy 68-team bracket. And I think, when you start to think about it, it makes a lot of sense. Like a school like Nevada, if a school from the Big Ten, let's say, wants Nevada's best player, it doesn't take a whole lot to get him, right? And he might only be 8th or 9th best player on that Big Ten team. And so you're just seeing the fatter get fatter and the skinnier get skinnier, because they can't keep up with the same level of Joneses. Now, I still believe there's a quality of basketball that needs to be upheld at each of the levels. There's only so many players. So eventually, the data is going to shake out, and maybe it starts to balance back. But it really does come down to how much the kids are getting. And if that's life-changing, you got to go take that money, even if you're not going to see the floor. And that's had a ripple effect. The other part of that, too, is that if you're, even look at like UNLV, Nevada, and Grand Canyon's rosters this year, they have to start over every year no matter what, even if they keep their coach, right? So you're adding 8 transfer portal players, but you still have the same staff. The old days, you used to be able to develop your guys, keep them for 2-3 years, and then have that awesome year ready to go for the tournament. And that's quickly going away unless you're in the Ivy League. So all that stuff is a challenge. And then you talked about 76. I do think, where the Mountain West is right now, that would be one of the leagues. This would be one of the leagues I think could benefit by getting probably an extra 1 team a year from the extra 8, because there always seems to be one that just barely gets left out, like Boise State last year for sure gets in under 76. But by the time 76 rolls around, fellas, we're going to be dealing with 3 leagues out here in the West. We're going to have the Pac-12, and they're going to be probably taking most of the bids. And then, New Mexico, UNLV, and Grand Canyon are going to be left with what right now projects to be a not so great Mountain West. And hopefully, those other teams, including Hawaii and UTEP, who are joining the league, can upgrade their budgets, upgrade their rosters. So that is the Mountain West does continue to be a stellar league. But that does give me some pause for that. And then the WCC, I think, is getting even more depleted by losing, Gonzaga, who's like everything to the league. So we're going to be in a whole different world next year on all fronts when it comes to conference realignment and a new bracket. So I do think the new Pac-12 is in great shape, but I do fear for the new Mountain West and the new WCC.
We are speaking with Rocco Miller, college hoops analyst, Bracketeer, field of 68, and you're covering a lot. I'll leave you with 2 questions. Actually, 1 question with kind of a loaded one, but some bold predictions for the Mountain West. Who's your player of the year?
Mason Falslove. I think he knows his role. He loves Logan, Utah. I'm picking Utah State to win the regular season. Mainly because they're not as deep as San Diego State, so they are going to need to stay healthy, of course. But these guys all know their roles, and they did a great job to keep that nucleus together. Besides Albury, so if they win the league, Mason Falslove's definitely winning Player of the Year.
And then I know we mentioned earlier on the show that the unanimous pick for the number 1. Not number 1 seed, but just to win the conference outright was San Diego State. What if we go on the backside of that? Who's your sleeper team in the Mountain West to maybe not get as much recognition up front, but has a chance to come out and maybe make a run for the Mountain West title?
Yeah, well, I think title-wise, Grand Canyon has to be the team, and New Mexico, of course. We've talked about New Mexico to death about that potentially, but Grand Canyon's got like the 4 guys I listed earlier, bona fide, proven winners at Division I level. It's just and plus some real depth and an awesome home court advantage. So they could stack a lot of wins in the league. That's the team I'm looking at the most to probably. It would surprise, I think, the traditional Mountain West fans if they were able to come in year 1 and take the league by storm like that. I would have said UNLV if it was a couple months ago, but knowing their injuries, I don't want to put any extra expectations. I just, at this point, hope they can get healthy so we can see what peak UNLV looks like at some point. And then if you want like a super deep sleeper to maybe pull off an upset in the tournament, certainly not going to compete for the league title. I like the energy and the pedigree that Wyoming has with Sundance Hicks. Certainly a lot of underrated players, but if you're the Wyoming head coach, you thrive on underrated players. And I can't stop thinking about what he did at Green Bay 2 years ago and all the success he was able to produce at a place where they were rock bottom at the bottom of D1 before he got there and was able to, I think, get 19 or 20 wins. Maybe if there is a story from the bottom of the league to look for, it would be in Laramie.
Well, thanks again, Rocco, for coming on the Pit Press with us. College hoops analyst, Bracketeer, field of 68, basket under review. Man, there's so many things popping up. You guys are doing really interesting work, and I follow it very closely. You guys cover just about every corner of the country. So kudos to you guys. But thanks again for jumping on with us. We appreciate it. And maybe we'll see you at the Pit again this year. You're going to make another trip to Albuquerque?
I definitely got to get back there, especially with all those guys there from UC San Diego. I'm excited to see how it plays out. And if we can time it to where it fits right into the travel schedule, I will go there with zero hesitation. I had a wonderful experience I love the community there. Everybody's so friendly. Everybody's so knowledgeable. Albuquerque, the whole state of New Mexico is just super underrated and beautiful. So I hope it's a great season, and I'm happy to join you guys anytime.
We appreciate it. Maybe we'll bug you down the road a little bit. But again, Rocco Miller, appreciate your time, man. We'll let you go and have fun at Mountain West Media Days.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
All right. We will be right back. We'll take a short commercial break, but then we'll come back with Ed Nunez, Greg Archuleta, and we'll cover some Lobo football.
October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and at Capitol Ford in Santa Fe, we're proud to stand with the survivors, the fighters, and the families who inspire us every single day. And while we honor their strength, we're also helping you with the strength to save with special dealer offers. Like a new Ford F-150 XLT, save with 3.9% APR financing for 72 months. Or a new Ford Bronco Sport, lease for just $399 a month at Capitol Ford in
Got to mess with the screen again. Thank you for everyone for tuning in to the Pit Press Live. Tonight we had Rocco Miller, college hoops analyst, Bracketeer, Field of 68. Basket under review. The guy's a busy guy. Nick, I wanted to get your thoughts while I kind of just get this screen adjusted because we're going to bring Ed in, who's somehow disappeared backstage.
Yeah, for sure, man. Happy to do it. Rocco Miller, one of the best analysts in college basketball. His resume speaks for itself. You know, you kind of talked about all his credentials, all the stuff that he's involved with. He just broke down pretty much every single Mountain West team and what this season could look like from an expert's perspective. So just having him on, man, was awesome.
Yeah, he's a super friendly guy. I told you right before we jumped on that when I met him at the Pit, I just kind of walked over to him in the press conference room after we had finished talking with Patino. And I just said, hey, man, this is who I am. This is what we do. Would you be interested in coming on and talking some college hoops with us? And he politely obliged and said, yeah, of course, man, just bring me on anytime you want. And just the platform that him and everyone else at the Field of 68 has built is crazy. And now they're talking about doing these early season games during middle of the day. It's all streamed on their network. Just impressive stuff, man. And it's really cool to see it take off. And he is definitely one of those guys that covers basketball from a national perspective, but he shows a lot of love to the Mountain West too, because he lives on the West Coast. He follows it religiously, and he just knows how good the basketball is out west. And those East Coasters, man, I always feel like they're a little biased because when the Mountain West games tip off, it's already 10 o'clock their time, 11 o'clock their time, and everyone likes to kind of tap into Mountain West hoops. So, but without further ado, we got some additional guests joining us tonight to talk some Lobo football. Ed Nunez, Greg Archuleta. Good evening, guys. How's it going?
Going good, Eric.
Good evening.
All right. Ed, I know that you wanted to make an announcement. I know that you kind of been doing more local radio recently. You were on 610, the sports animal, this afternoon with the one and only Kenny Thomas. How did that go, man?
You know what? He's started a new show there. Fred Slow and Van Nunley no longer with 610, and they started a new show, Kenny Thomas Unfiltered. And I was asked to come in and co-host with Kenny this afternoon, and then guest host. And hopefully, everybody that's listening can give a call tomorrow because we're going to be talking about Bronco Mendenhall, the NBA, things like that. But I got to say this about Kenny. He was very gracious. He asked about the pit press right away, asked where we were. He's heard, he said, hey, I've been on the pit press. He pumped us up before I even had to. So I do want to mention that. He mentioned our show, said it's a good show. Brandon Vogt, who the guy at KKOB over there, who's been involved in Greg, you know Brandon, the guy who's been involved in media for a long time. He loves our show. He goes, you guys are killing it, and I was really glad to report that. So Kenny and I had a lot of fun today. We went back and forth with the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, Lobo basketball. He had a chance to talk to the team yesterday, and he mentioned to them that, hey, you play hard, the community will be behind you. I think he's excited for the upcoming season. But Kenny's got a million things going on, man. He really does, and I was glad he brought me in. But I got to tell you, all three of you, that he showed me and the pit press a lot of respect, and I really appreciate that. And hopefully we can get him back on the show. But, I will be guest hosting tomorrow, so please give me a call. I'm going to have Robert Portnoy on, voice of the Lobos, Ray Birmingham to talk about baseball, and Ned James, the one and only Ned James. But 505-246-0610. If I'll be on from 4 to 6, and it was a really fun experience, Eric.
I'll make sure to dial in and give you guys a hard time. But Ed, before we jump into more Lobo football talk, which is Greg's specialty, I know he's waiting behind the screen ready to jump in and dive through. But what did you think, Rocco Miller? I know that you were listening backstage. I know you geek out on college hoops, X's and O's. The guy knows his stuff, man. It's super impressive. But I wanted to get your thoughts.
Deep dive on the Lobos. I really was listening very intently to what he said about the coaching staff, the player Kevin Patton. Dayton Albury said he thought Kevin Patton would be drafted by the NBA in an interview with Jeff Grammer. So a lot of stuff what he said about Mike Roberts, how they coach, what the system is. I was listening intently, and that guy knows his stuff. He really does. And I thought you guys asked some great questions about the conference, where you guys thought New Mexico would land up. And we should get somebody had them fourth. It was a Jeff Grammer picks the Lobos fourth. And Kenny said that today. We don't know what they're going to be like because we haven't seen them, but we're anxious to see them. And so I thought that guy there, Rocco Miller, man, that guy knows his stuff. I really enjoyed it. I really did. I was listening intently when he's talking about certain players, and he knows the roster. He knows how Coach Olen coaches, and him mentioned Nick, you were there. No, Nick, you couldn't stay for practice. Assistant coach Mike Roberts is a screamer. Man, Mike Roberts is running here, running there. It's Olen. It's he's tying everything together. But Mike Roberts is all over the place. I like that. I like that intensity. And I was talking to Hunter Green. He was sitting next to me, and he said he wished he had somebody like that when he was a senior. So I enjoyed it. I really did, and I thought you guys did a great job.
Appreciate that. Yeah, we'll look to get more guests like that coming up on some shows in the next couple of weeks. I know we reached out to Brendan Williams at GCU, Go Lopes Radio. We got the UNLV guys that are going to join us. Steve Ivey over at CSU. So we'll get some more Lobo hoops, Mountain West hoops coverage coming in the next couple of weeks. But enough Lobo hoops talk for now. Let's talk about some Lobo football. And the man of the hour, Mr. Greg Archuleta, our unofficial or official beat writer for your UNM Lobos over here at the Pit Press. For those of you that are either new to the show or have been following us more closely, Greg has been covering Lobo football for us more exclusively throughout the season, bringing us previews and recaps of each game. Really enlightened to have him join our team. Greg, how you doing tonight?
Good, guys. How are you guys doing? Ed, I like your shirt.
Oh, thank you. Actually, my son gave it to me.
Yeah.
Nick, you have good
So,
taste.
Greg, we'll
Thanks,
rip
Greg.
off the Band-Aid. Lobos defeat Nevada 24-22. In your article, you covered them. Wasn't something that was visually pleasing. Definitely one of those wrench out, grut out kind of games. But what was your overall take on the Lobos' latest victory over Nevada?
Well, and looking back at it, maybe it was a little bit more coming critical than I should have been, because we got to bear in mind that this is a new coaching staff with 72, 75 new players. What is it? And so any win now, I think, is a precious win. So no matter how you win, how ugly, doesn't matter. They're 4-3. Like I said, in my article, Bob Davie was 4-3 his first year, and that was very impressive. And then they proceeded to lose their last 6 of that year. So I'm hoping that there's not a repeat there. But I will say that in order for them to not have that, they're going to have to step up in some areas. Their defense is doing really great things when they're put in bad situations. So if their offense and their special teams can just play a little bit cleaner, I think they have a shot in every game. But by the same token, if they keep playing the way they are, and I said in the article, I think they're playing to the level of their competition. And we saw that on the road against Boise State and San Jose State. That doesn't work on the road. And now that you're stepping up competition at home with the likes of San Diego State, Utah State this weekend, and then CSU coming in, they're going to have to clean some things up if they want to get to a bowl game.
Yeah, Ed, I know you didn't have a chance to watch the game live, but you watched it after the fact, and I know you took some notes and you have your opinion on it. What was your take on the Lobo win over Nevada Saturday?
First of all, I just want to say this to Greg. Greg, I'm glad you're part of what we're doing, man. You wrote for the Journal for a long time, and we're glad to have your expertise on here. I've read every article that you've written for the Pit Press, along with what my son has written, and Eric and Ryan Tamora. All good stuff. But I think in watching it again, and Kenny said this to me today. He said, we should have won by more. And I said, this is not a program. Winning ugly. I think you said that, Greg. Winning ugly is the formula for now, and it's a win. That's the thing. And I think the way they closed it out, stopping Carter Jones had 10 yards ahead of him. He could have run for the first down. Thank God he didn't on that big 4th and 2. He threw. And that kid's got a quick release. Son, you told me he completed 17 passes in a row at one time, and he gets it out quick. Sidearm, he's going to be a heck of a player. Crucial stop there. A 4th and 2 converting, that's winning football. So, yeah, it wasn't the prettiest. They scored a touchdown in the red zone. Lobstein had it called back, a hold, a fumble, and Greg's right there. Ned James had said this about Jack Lane, that when he plays clean like that, he didn't turn the ball over. Now they're starting to turn it over. So, but again, remember, a new roster, new players, new program. If anybody said before the season that they're at 4 wins now, what would you have said? We didn't know. So it's winning football. They won. That's it. Now this is another crucial game Saturday. And is it a life and death? No, but you want to protect home field. We talked about this a little bit today on Kenny's show. You want to protect home field, and that guy's coming back. That guy being Bronco, right? And Greg, you remember when New Mexico beat Fresno State years ago, and they were calling Jim Sweeney's a weenie. You remember that? And then Sweeney the next year tried to run up 100 on the Lobos, man. I don't know if this game is the same thing, but Bronco, I would expect some fans to be full throat on Saturday at 1 p.m. I would expect that. I would hope that. I can't be there. But I think it's, Eric, you asked, I think it's winning football, and they won. And that's it. And hey, DJ McKinney, man, that running back room is full. McKinney showed some burst. The other guy that has kind of disappeared a little bit is Dorian Thomas. We haven't seen as much of him in plays and gadget plays. And Coach Eck, I don't think, ran any gadget plays on Saturday. But I like what I saw. They could have been this and that. And Greg was right, absolutely right in his article. They have to play a little bit cleaner. I'm just glad they won.
Yeah, sticking with the running game, Ed, you make a solid point. The Lobos ran for 210 yards, and it was pretty apparent early on that X game plan was to stick it to them, man. They were running early and often with a healthy mixture of backs kind of attacking the game. I think Scott Trey Humphrey got the first carry of the game and even got the second one. But they were running on downs that Nevada knew they were going to run the ball, and they still continued to run and convert first down. So you're right, Ed, that running back room is full. They can count on just about anybody. We've seen some of the guys like Bankston go off for those big time gains, home run type touchdown runs. But it was DJ McKinney and his 2 touchdowns in this game that was the difference maker. I wanted to get your thoughts, Greg, on the overall game plan of being able to forcefully run the ball early and often, and then just the overall impact that DJ McKinney had on this game.
Well, that's always the winning formula, right? And so I think whenever the Lobos have outrushed their opponent, they won the game, and when their opponents outrushed them, they've lost. And so whenever you can have, and they have the 3-headed monster, right? So the offensive line play, when you're coming out and able to establish the line of scrimmage and own it, I think that that's a winning formula. And so obviously, I will say this about Scott Trey. He got dinged up early in that UCLA game. He hadn't looked really right until this week, and so I think his reemergence kind of helped DJ, because it took some of the pressure off DJ and let him have a little bit more burst when he had his touches, because as you're sharing the ball, when you get the ball, you want to make a bigger splash. And so obviously DJ was huge and instrumental in the win this week. The funny thing about the offense right now is if they can hold it to 2 turnovers or less, and even if they lose the turnover battle, they win games. And so if they can just play a clean game, which they're going to have to do here against high-powered Utah State offense, again, they've got a shot to win each of the games down the road, but they're going to have to clean some things up. I think Jack Lane did play a little bit better. He made a great option read on the play for 54 yards that got him in position. He didn't do as many I thought he had some games there that he was trying to hold the ball and make plays, and ended up making some bad decisions. I didn't see that as much this game, so that's something good. They were able to work Lobstein in a little bit more on short yardage and goal line situations, so I think they're expanding. One thing I think, and this is just my own thought process about this team, is they were playing pretty clean early on. And I think that was because when you bring in a new coaching staff and 75 new players, you probably have to keep things pretty simple at first. And as teams have scouted them and have tried to add more, maybe the additional things that they had to learn has caused a little bit of confusion on their own offensive end, which I think is natural, because as you add more and having 75 players trying to continue to mesh, you might see a few more mistakes. So maybe hopefully they've got that behind them a little bit. It looks like Lane is playing a little bit better. And the offense is really the key, because the defense, I think, like we said before, they've been put in some bad situations. Early on in Boise State could have run the score up early. The defense didn't let them do that. This week, the same thing. And so, like Ed said, as long as you win, doesn't matter how, right? It could be 60-0. It could be 24-22. It's still a W at the end of the day.
Yeah, Greg, I had a question for you. It was one of the questions that you asked Coach Eck at the press conference today. You asked him about kind of the problem of allowing opposing quarterbacks to get in rhythm. We saw Walker Ejett in the San Jose State game. He completed like 19-some passes in a row. On Saturday, Carter Jones, Nevada quarterback, completes 17 passes in a row. You asked Coach Eck about, is that an issue, and what is UNM doing to fix it? And what are your thoughts on that, Greg?
Well, I did like that at least it looked this week that they were a little bit more willing to go to man, and maybe it was just the personnel of Nevada where they didn't seem as willing at San Jose State. And I don't know if Coach Eck thought maybe San Jose State had a few more explosive wide receivers, especially their number 10. But I think as a defense, you've got to dare the quarterback sometimes in man to throw over you and make him make the throw. What's happening that I think is, when you're giving them 7-8 yards on first down, trying to play a softer zone, that's why Nevada's able to hang around in that game. I think their quarterback got in a little bit of rhythm. Nevada hung around. Lobos made the play at the end of the game, both on offense and defense. But moving forward, especially, you look at Utah State and Bryson Barnes and what he's done, I don't think the Lobos can get away with that. And so hopefully they can hone in on that a little bit sooner on defense. That's the one critique I still have on defense is they've got to try to take away some of that short yardage stuff and challenge them a little bit more. And maybe this quarterback can beat him man-to-man. And Coach Eck did say that part of it is when you have a mobile running quarterback, you want to play a little bit more zone so you have more eyes on him. But my counter to that would be, well, hey, maybe get your defensive line a little bit more disciplined, keep their lanes to keep the quarterback contained, and then maybe you can play a little bit more man behind it. But, they're 4-3, which I didn't think they'd get to 4 wins this year, so he's doing something right.
One more question for you, Greg, then I'll turn it back to Eric. But just a little bit more on your thoughts on the upcoming matchup with Utah State. Obviously, there's a huge emotional component to this game, and I know we'll probably talk about that here in a little bit. But matchup-wise, this is a Utah State team that puts a lot of points on the board. You talked about their quarterback, Bryson Barnes, 1,600 passing yards, 13 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions. What kind of matchup problems does Utah State pose for UNM?
Well, yeah, I think you just hit it on the head because the Lobo defense, the other stigma, but they have not created a lot of turnovers on defense. And so when you got a guy that can take care of the ball and can throw it, that's going to pose some problems for the Lobos, as we saw with both Boise State and San Jose State. And so the Lobos are going to have to play better on the defensive line, try to put some more pressure on him, make him force throws, make him uncomfortable, maybe at the expense of the running game, but you've got to get him. And again, that was led to my question this afternoon. You've got to try to do things to get him out of rhythm. And so if you have to try to put a little bit more pressure and see if you can rattle him and again, get him into some uncomfortable situations, I think that's the Lobos' best opportunity, especially if they're not able to force turnovers.
Eric, back to you.
Yeah, no, on that topic, I think the first half of that Boise State game, we saw the defense excel, right? They had four sacks, 10 tackles for loss. They were getting after Madsen. This is a different quarterback in Bryson Barnes, I think. I think he's more elusive, more of a running threat than Madsen was. He's a bigger quarterback, but he can move. So if he has to kind of escape the passing game and turn more into a running threat, I think that's where maybe the Lobos might run into some trouble, especially with those edge rushers that are trying to get upfield, or maybe they kind of give up the edge and let Bryson Barnes get upfield because he can definitely pick up some bigger games in in the games that I've actually watched them play. So just one of those posing threats. I think they're kind of an interesting topic. I think they were constructed really well. But yeah, definitely high energy game. I think the Lobo fan base is looking forward to this one, has definitely had this one circled on their calendar. But Ed, I'm going to throw a curveball at you here. I was looking up some of the power grades for the last game, and the highest rated offensive player for UNM on Saturday was James Lobstein. I know the sample size in plays was definitely much smaller. He only got 6 snaps, but he was effective in those snaps. He didn't throw the ball much, but he was in those read and react, more of a running style quarterback. Do you think there's more room in this offense to kind of integrate a 2 quarterback system And or Greg, I'll pose the same question to you. But I think it's a question that Lobo fans are starting to consider, right? Because we've seen a little bit of a drop off in Jack Lane's game, especially when he's not able to find a Dorian Thomas or make those throws downfield. But they've been able to turn to Lob's team to get in the game and convert some first down. So I threw that stat out to you, highest rated offensive player in the power rankings in the PFF. What do you think about that? And do you think there's more room for Lob's team to get more snaps?
I think it's a small sample size, like you said. But if that touchdown isn't called back, the ratings look even a little better. I think there is, and then one throw to Jack Lane, he's lucky it was intercepted. He tried to throw to Keegan Johnson open. He threw it, and the Nevada safety just dropped the interception. So that would have been another turnover. But I think Coach Eck likes Lobstein. I do. He's in the red zone there. So I think there'll be a package for him, maybe 3 to 5 plays. They might use him. And so, yeah, I do think that you're going to see a little bit more of him. And if Jack Lane continues to turn the ball over, you will see him more. You will see him more. And Coach Eck said that Jack Lane's the starter, and he is. But I think if you see things go south again in the turnover battle, that you'll see more of Lobstein. But I think they'll have 3 to 5 plays for him on Saturday. I would expect that.
Yeah, I don't think it's one of those things where we have to jump ship on Jack Lane, but I think there's a little bit of room to kind of work a more 2-quarterback system. Greg, wanted to get your thoughts because you kind of touched on Jack Lane a little bit, just indecisive at times, right? Holding onto the ball a little bit too long and throwing the ball away in panic. And sometimes he's throwing into double coverage or even triple coverage, and that's where those turnovers start to happen. So do you think that there's more snaps available, or do you think there should be more snaps available for quarterback Lobstein?
Well, I'm still one of the old school guys where I say if you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. And so I do like the fact that, at least for now, Lane is the ingrained starter. But like Ed said, I do also like that they seem to have realized that you've got to get playmakers on the field. Scotty Miller's been kind of silent. The other, Keegan Johnson, has been kind of silent. So you got to get somebody else involved, so they don't key exclusively on the running backs. And if Lobstein can come in and give them a spark in the run game and even with some passing, then maybe there are some series that they can use him on or utilize him in short yardage situations, because you got to get your playmakers on the field. And the offense in general has been the thing that's kind of needs to accelerate to keep up with the defense. And so I do see that they are trying to get ways to get Lobstein involved. I think he should be involved. And so, moving forward, but I do think it's probably on a, just situational basis how they use him. But he obviously is a weapon, and you'd rather have him in there with a chance to make an impact rather than on the sidelines the entire game.
Greg, I had one question for you. It's about this Lobo offense kind of looking like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. When it comes to one game, they're a really good throwing team, like against New Mexico State. Jack Lane had a fantastic game. And then in this last game against Nevada, they run the football 42 times. So where does UNM find that balance between run and pass?
Well, I think, Coach Eck has always said he'd rather be a run-first team, but it's always predicated on what the defense gives you. And I think New Mexico State was one of those situations where they were willing to see if Lane could beat them with his arm. And he had a good game that game. The thing is sometimes the other teams have been able to do the same thing, but get a little bit more pressure on Lane than New Mexico State was able to. And so that made a big difference in terms of what Lane is able to. I think, like all quarterbacks, right? If you give him time, he can hurt you. But if you speed up his thinking process and trying to get to the primary or look at secondary or tertiary targets, I think that's where things start to break down. And so I'm kind of hoping that, I know Utah State has a couple of good ends, but they've been susceptible to get some yardage too. So maybe Lane can get into rhythm and get hot on offense, passing the ball too, to give the Lobos a chance to keep up. You don't want to get in a track meet with Utah State, but if they can keep Utah State's offense off the field, that gives them a much better chance.
I got just in what you're saying about those two ends, Greg. Maybe you'll see a lot of screens, bubble screens, middle screens. Let those ends, like Eric said, rush upfield, and you might see with the running backs, maybe DJ McKinney gets a few of those, and Bankston, and I think with those ends rushing the way they do, they might be susceptible to a middle screen or screen or two. But Greg, I want to ask you about Jackson Eck, the linebacker for New Mexico. How impressive you've been with him?
Well, you can tell he's the coach's son, right? Because I don't know, in terms of natural ability, I would not exactly put him in Brian Urlacher's class, but it really helps when the plays, what they're running, and you're running to the ball because you know what's going on. And so I think he's, his benefit is he's a really good defensive player, and he understands the game. So he's always in the area. And I think you brought this up, Ed, that, a couple of those plays that if he doesn't make a tackle, it could be Nevada going to the house or at least having a huge gain. And so he's been instrumental to that defensive unit and helping them slow down opponents. And really, when I thought about the beginning of the year, thinking the offense might be the strength, it's really been the defense. And Eck has been a big part of that.
Yeah. Hey, Arch, I know you attended the press conference today. Were there any key takeaways worth mentioning, or what did you walk away from that press conference feeling like, maybe looking into this week? What did Coach Eck have to say?
Well, the thing that, and the whole reason I'm with you guys at the Pit Press, Eric, is that, I wrote a column last year that the Journal picked up when Bronco Mendenhall left, calling him Benedict Bronco. And so, like you said, for the fans, for those of us that, remember Bronco, this is a huge game. For the 30-odd Lobos that were coached under Bronco last year, that's a huge game. And so what Coach X said is like, hey, if that motivates those 30 guys, that's awesome, right? But to ask those guys to tell the other 70 that are new, hey, you need to play harder because I don't like this coach or he abandoned us, is not realistic. And so as much as we want to make a big deal out of it, and I will make a big deal out of Bronco coming back, really it comes down to the Lobos just executing and playing cleaner football. So I don't expect them to get caught up in the hoopla of Bronco coming back. What they need to focus on is, better play on both sides of the line, a little cleaner looks from their punt returner. So he's either letting the ball bounce or be more definitive and more, have a decision in mind when he gets the punt, so they don't muff these punts and stop putting the defense in these situations. I think if the Lobos can get ahead of Utah State and make them one-dimensional, as good as Barnes may be, that gives the Lobo defense a huge advantage. And so that was the takeaway that I took, that it's really, it's still come down to execution, right? So the Lobos have some things to clean up. But if they do and get to 5-3, then things start to get exciting around here.
Guys, Nick, Ed, did you guys have anything else to ask Greg?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of, the emotional component of it, Greg. I know you touched on it, and Coach Eck talked about it too. Like, I think it's the Lobo fan base, the community of Albuquerque that's investing a lot of emotion into this game. But, as far as tickets at the door, I mean, that's ultimately what UNM kind of wants out of this. Is a big turnout means, more revenue for the athletic department. But just kind of what's your reaction to all the emotional hoopla surrounding this game?
Well, I hope that's a factor in more people showing up. Now, we all knew that there were not going to be 9,000, 37,000 people for the Nevada game as there was at New Mexico State. And Coach Heck even said that in his post-game press conference. And he used the S word when he said when you play like S, then you can't expect the fans to show up when you come back home. But you would hope that they would have gotten a little bit more than they did for the Nevada game, and realizing it's an 8 o'clock start. So, I also listened to some with the interview with Rocco and talking about how knowledgeable Lobo fans are about basketball. Now we got to get them knowledgeable about football as well. And I realize football is always the redheaded stepchild of the athletic department. And you guys know me that I've, been football forever. So I'm going to always feel like that. I realize this is a basketball town. Between the four of us, basketball is my favorite sport. But football drives a lot of the university financial engine. And if the Lobos can get the football program going, that benefits everything. Beyond basketball, benefits women's basketball, benefits the Olympic sports. And so if fans, our knowledgeable fans, can kind of get behind the Lobos, and I know they're trying to do some things off the field to bring them in, but we need some fan support to get the Lobo football program going. And, realizing that Coach Eck might be a hot prospect here, but if we can show him, hey, we give him some support too, there may be a reason to stay and not have a one-year exodus like the last coach.
Yeah. Hey, Greg, I have some comments rolling in. Wanted to give you some kudos from John Romero. He's an avid viewer, listener. We always appreciate him tuning in. Greg Archuleta is an Albuquerque sports journalism legend for decades. We have local sports royalty in the house. I promise to behave. Some other comments here. I'm going down here.
I think John's right. So,
yeah. From Eric Markham, another avid viewer. It's awesome to have him on the Pit Press. Yeah, we're thrilled to have him. I think he's adding a completely different element to how we're covering both football and basketball and basically any other sport around UNM athletics. There was something for Ed, too, that I wanted to show you, Ed. This kind of goes back to the Rocco Miller comments, but Rocco Miller knows his NCAA basketball like Ed Nunez knows his donuts. Rocco's new nickname is Street and Smith, the Bible of B-ball preseason info. Yeah, we appreciate you guys tuning in. And then Brennan Williams from Grow Lopes Radio, the king of West Coast college hoops. Rocco is the man. Western Washington, stand up. Like I mentioned before, we plan to get Brennan back on our show probably within the next week and a half to really do a deep dive on GCU. I know that they had an exhibition, so we'll have more to talk about there. John Romero, again, with the Vanderbilt talk. Vandy is top 10 for the first time, and Diego Pavia is talking about Natty. He's been talking about that since, I think, in the preseason. And I want to say that he's in potential talks for even the Heisman now, too, which is crazy to think about. A kid from Albuquerque with a ton of grit. I know that he's got his history with UNM. A lot of people don't care to talk about that anymore. I know I personally don't. I think he's representing for Albuquerque in a big, big way. Roger Holian, thank you, Eric. Lots of great coverage for our Lobos. Exciting time to be a Lobo fan. It is an exciting time. Lobo basketball right around the corner, and UNM football is looking to make a bowl game. And if they kind of stay on this trajectory, it's definitely some exciting times. Greg, got a question from Ronnie Chavez. What's the one sports story you covered that meant the most to you, and why?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. And let me think about that for a second. I guess, so the one that comes to mind the most, and this was after the journal. So for a while, Mark Smith and I were trying to come up with a website called Enchantment Sports, where we were trying to do what you guys have successfully done, by the way. We were trying to do some of that early before you guys arrived. So there was, and for those of you who didn't know, when I left the Journal, I actually worked for UNM, and for a few years was the football media relations contact. And so I was the contact when Mike Loxley was fired, the year he was fired, and then for Bob Davie, his first 2 years. And Bob Davie, I will say, a great coach. When he came in, he had a plan, triple option, very sound reasoning, very smart man. He and I did not see eye to eye. And so when I left UNM and had the opportunity to hook up with Mark for Enchantment Sports, there was a year, and it was the year I think after they did the 9-4 season, which I gave Bob Davie kudos then too, because that, they led the nation in rushing that year, and then somehow he lost his mind the next year and decided to go to the spread option. That's another story. But so he had a game where they were losing by 10, had the ball in field goal range, elected just to try to punch it in, and then couldn't punch it in, and then ended up being the end of the game. And so after the game, at his press conference, at his post-game news conference, I asked if he considered kicking the ball there and then taking the points, and then you'd be within one score. And then he kind of pulled an Allen Iverson. We're talking about practice. He said, because when I asked him, I think it was second down, and I asked him, and he said second down 17 times in his response. And in my rationale, which I tried to tell him, I was like, well, second down doesn't really matter when you're in the last 40 or 50 seconds. You're trying to get points and position yourself. So, and I think it was second down and 15 or 16. So I said, okay. And I just asked what his philosophy was. So I wasn't trying to get a lecture on second down. And so I happened to record all the Sunday NFL games on how many times they mentioned teams, whether they should kick a field goal early, and then kind of let him know. And so the next week during the Tuesday media luncheon that they usually have, it was tradition that the Journal reporter gets to ask the first question. Well, that week, Bob Davie let me ask the first question. And so I don't know if that's a great answer to the question. That's the easy out for me, just because it was satisfying with the tumultuous relationship I had with Bob Davie, that I felt like I finally earned his respect, maybe not as his SID, but as a reporter. And that had come full circle. And so that, to me, was one of the most satisfying things that I've had. Certainly, there's 100 with Rocky, but that one sticks out because it was the one with Bob Davie.
Well, we sure appreciate having you a part of the team, Greg. And then for some of you that may or may not have noticed, Greg has been covering football for us from a preview recap standpoint since the beginning of the football season. So we're definitely appreciative of him. Appreciate what Ed and Nick also bring to this coverage. Nick's been covering basketball primarily. He actually released a really interesting article earlier on in the week covering Coach Eric Olen's defensive philosophy that kind of touched a lot of similar points that Rocco Miller talked about tonight, and just kind of knowing Eric Olen's style of basketball. So just based off of the kind of coverage that we've been talking about tonight, and with the website, you guys can get kind of an idea of how we want to cover Lobos sports pretty consistently. So with basketball right around the corner, we'll hopefully get some more content up about Lobo women. I think they're deserving too, but we'll look to get some more basketball guests on in the upcoming shows. So for myself, Eric Moulton, the host tonight for the Pit Press Live, for Nick Nunez, Ed Nunez, Greg Archuleta, we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. We'll try to get a show put together maybe later this week and preview Utah State if we have the time. If not, then you can look forward to getting some more written content on the website from Greg and Nick. So thanks again for everyone tuning in, and everyone have a good night, and go Lobos.